So my name's Marianne Storey, I'm the CEO of Dorset Mind. The reason people are talking about mental health much more these days is because it became such a problem, didn't it? And it was a problem that we couldn't ignore anymore. And I think it's also something about the young generation. You know, young people are much more open to talking about mental health than other older generations. And I think that's really helping the wave of interest in mental health and opening up the conversation generally. I think the really important thing is any change in behaviour, because people are very good about hiding a difficulty with their mental health. So actually they could appear more happy or harder working, but actually that's just a cover for them feeling worse in themselves. So the real thing is to spot a change in somebody's behaviour. So if somebody becomes very withdrawn, or if somebody becomes very active, you know, over interested in exercise or working long hours, that's the key, I think, is a difference in behaviour. Well, in an emergency crisis situation where somebody is really serious about harming themselves, the really important thing is to get them to a safe place, whether that's physically or mentally. So don't leave them. Ask them to call the Samaritans. If necessary, call 999 if you're really that concerned about them. But it's about keeping them safe and keeping them talking. And I think when people get to that point, it can be extremely overwhelming for them. And so I know I've said this many times, but really to get them to talk about how they're feeling will start to bring that kind of panic in them down a little bit, so that you can at least get them to a safe place. Yeah, it can be difficult hearing somebody talk about themselves in a very harmful way. And I think it's important that people do talk about how that's affected them. So either with a professional counsellor, or even with just a friend or a relative or a parent, to talk about how that made them feel. And people are very uncomfortable talking about suicide. But I think as a community, we need to talk about it openly and ask people, if, like your friend, for example, it would have been probably welcome to him if you'd said, have you had thoughts of hurting yourself? You know, do you get to a point sometimes where you feel like life isn't worth living? Because for them it helps to bring down those feelings of being overwhelmed with, oh, there's no point anymore, because they've been able to say it out loud. It's almost like releasing the pressure from a pressure cooker to some degree. I'm not saying it's, you know, the be all and end all, but it just helps a little bit for them to be able to express how they're feeling. I think it's really important, if somebody has witnessed or heard about a suicide, certainly not to over kind of glamorise it. And I think it's important not to talk about where the suicide took place or how it happened, because that can sow a seed perhaps in someone else's mind, or highlight the fact that this is somewhere where you can successfully do that. So it's much better, I think, if you're talking about a suicide, to talk about the positives of trying to become mentally healthy, how you can look after your well-being, reasons to live, you know, take a positive spin on it, so that if somebody is perhaps looking around social media, they get a positive message rather than, oh, this is how or where you could go. Yes, well, I mean, every suicide costs our community something in the region of about £1 million in terms of emergency services, the inquest, counselling, therapeutic, you know, economic costs to the community. So there's a financial side to it. But of course, there's the impact on that person's friends, family, community. It has this kind of ripple effect through the community. And it's a very traumatic thing, you know, living after a suicide is a very, very difficult thing. And actually, statistically, a relative of someone who's taken their life is then 4 times more at risk themselves to take their own life. And so it has a catastrophic effect, not just on the person, but their friends and their community. And we do a lot of counselling and therapeutic work with emergency services, because of course they come across these things, and it is very traumatic. Yeah, I think the isolation has been very difficult for people, and obviously for a lot of people it's brought about a depression. Anxiety has become a very common thing that we're seeing now. Anxiety about leaving the house, anxiety about going back to work, and just readjusting back to I won't use the word normal, but back to a different way of living. And of course, fear of the virus itself, you know, so we really feel that there's a level of anxiety around that has been triggered by COVID. Yes, well, we talk a lot about the 5 ways to well-being. So there are 5 things within your life that, if they are in balance, are the recipe for a healthy, mentally healthy life. So connecting with people, getting active, giving back, so doing something, but giving something back to somebody or to your community, learning, so learning a new skill or learning a new language or just learning something new, mindfulness, but it's really any kind of activity that gets you focused on something which takes you out of your thought processes, basically. So it could be knitting, it could be swimming, it could be walking, it could be just watching the clouds go by, but something that keeps your focus. So those are the 5 things that we talk about a lot in terms of giving you a kind of holistic, healthy mental health.